Why do you come hither? Have you no trust in your husband? Cried he impetuously. Would you throw the blight of that fatal birthmark over my labours? It is not well done. Go, prying woman, go. Nay, Aylmer, said Georgiana, with the firmness of which she possessed no stinted endowment. It is not you that have a right to complain. You mistrust your wife. You have concealed the anxiety with which you watch the development of this experiment. Think not so unworthily of me, my husband. Tell me all the risk we run, and fear not that I shall shrink, for my share in it is far less than your own. No, no, Georgiana, said Aylmer impatiently. It must not be. I submit, replied she calmly, and Aylmer, I shall quaff whatever draught you bring me, but it will be on the same principle that would induce me to take a dose of poison if offered by your hand. My noble wife, said Aylmer, deeply moved, I knew not the height and depth of your nature until now. Nothing shall be concealed. Know then that this crimson hand, superficial as it seems, has clutched its grasp into your being with a strength of which I had no previous conception. I have already administered agents powerful enough to do aught except change your entire physical system. Only one thing remains to be tried. If that fail us, we are ruined. Why did you hesitate to tell me this? Asked she. Because, Georgiana, said Aylmer in a low voice, there is danger. Danger? There is but one danger, that this horrible stigma shall be left upon my cheek, cried Georgiana. Remove it, whatever be the cost, or we shall both go mad. Heaven knows your words are too true, said Aylmer sadly. And now, dearest, return to your boudoir. In a little while all will be tested. He conducted her back and took leave of her with a solemn tenderness which spoke far more than his words how much was now at stake. After his departure, Georgiana became wrapped in musings. She considered the character of Aylmer, and did it completer justice than at any previous moment. Her heart exulted, while it trembled, at his honourable love, so pure and lofty that it would accept nothing less than perfection, nor miserably make itself contented with an earthlier nature than he had dreamed of. She felt how much more precious was such a sentiment than that meaner kind which would have borne with the imperfection for her sake, and have been guilty of treason to holy love by degrading its perfect idea to the level of the actual, and with her whole spirit she prayed that for a single moment she might satisfy his highest and deepest conception. Longer than one moment she knew well it could not be, for his spirit was ever on the march, ever ascending, and each instant required something that was beyond the scope of the instant before. The sound of her husband's footsteps aroused her. He bore a crystal goblet containing a liquor colourless as water, but bright enough to be the draught of immortality. Aylmer was pale, but it seemed rather the consequence of a highly wrought state of mind and tension of spirit than of fear or doubt. The concoction of the draught has been perfect, said he, in answer to Georgiana's look. Unless all my science has deceived me, it cannot fail. Save on your account, my dearest Aylmer, observed his wife. I might wish to put off this birthmark of mortality by relinquishing mortality itself in preference to any other mode. Life is but a sad possession to those who have attained precisely the degree of moral advancement at which I stand. Were I weaker and blinder, it might be happiness. Were I stronger, it might be endured hopefully. But being what I find myself, methinks I am of all mortals the most fit to die. You are fit for heaven without tasting death, replied her husband. But why do we speak of dying? This draught cannot fail. Behold its effect upon this plant. On the window-seat there stood a geranium, diseased with yellow blotches, which had overspread all its leaves. Aylmer poured a small quantity of the liquid upon the soil in which it grew. In a little time, when the roots of the plant had taken up the moisture, the unsightly blotches began to be extinguished in a living verdure. There needed no proof, said Georgiana, quietly. Give me the goblet. I joyfully stake all upon your word. Drink then, thou lofty creature, exclaimed Aylmer, with fervid admiration. There is no taint of imperfection on thy spirit. Thy sensible frame, too, shall soon be all perfect. She quaffed the liquid and returned the goblet to his hand. It is grateful, said she, with a placid smile. Methinks it is like water from a heavenly fountain, for it contains I know not what of unobtrusive fragrance and deliciousness. It allays a feverish thirst that had parched me for many days. And now, dearest, let me sleep. My earthly senses are closing over my spirit, like the leaves around the heart of a rose at sunset. She spoke the last words with a gentle reluctance, as if it required almost more energy than she could command to pronounce the faint and lingering syllables. Scarcely had they loitered through her lips ere she was lost in slumber. Aylmer sat by her side, watching her aspect with the emotions proper to a man the whole value of whose existence was involved in the process now to be tested. Mingled with this mood, however, was the philosophic investigation characteristic of a man of science. Not the minutest symptom escaped him. A heightened flush of the cheek, a slight irregularity of breath, a quiver of the eyelid, a hardly perceptible tremor through the frame. Such were the details which, as the moments passed, he wrote down in his folio volume. Intense thought had set its stamp upon every previous page of that volume, but the thoughts of years were all concentrated upon the last. While thus employed, he failed not to gaze often at the fatal hand, and not without a shudder. Yet once, by a strange and unaccountable impulse, he pressed it with his lips. His spirit recoiled, however, in the very act, and Georgiana, out of the midst of her deep sleep, moved uneasily and murmured as if in remonstrance. Again Aylmer resumed his watch, nor was it without avail. The crimson hand which at first had been strongly visible in the marble paleness of Georgiana's cheek now grew more faintly outlined. She remained not less pale than ever, but the birthmark, with every breath that came and went, lost somewhat of its former distinctness. Its presence had been awful, its departure was more awful still. Watch the stain of the rainbow fading out the sky, and you will know how that mysterious symbol passed away. "By heaven, it is well nigh gone," said Aylmer to himself, in almost irrepressible ecstasy. "I can scarcely trace it now. Success! Success! And now it is like the faintest rose color. The lightest flush of blood across her cheek would overcome it. But she is so pale." He drew aside the window curtain, and suffered the light of natural day to fall into the room and rest upon her cheek. At the same time he heard a gross, hoarse chuckle, which he had long known as his servant Aminadab's expression of delight. "Ah, clod! Ah, earthly mass!" cried Aylmer, laughing in a sort of frenzy. "You have served me well. Matter and spirit, earth and heaven, have both done their part in this. Laugh, thing of the senses. You have earned the right to laugh." These exclamations broke Georgiana's sleep. She slowly unclosed her eyes, and gazed into the mirror which her husband had arranged for that purpose. A faint smile flitted over her lips when she recognized how barely perceptible was now that crimson hand which had once blazed forth with such disastrous brilliancy as to scare away all their happiness. But then her eyes sought Aylmer's face with a trouble and anxiety that he could by no means account for. "My poor Aylmer," murmured she. "Poor? Nay, richest, happiest, most favored," exclaimed he. "My peerless bride, it is successful. You are perfect." "My poor Aylmer," she repeated, with a more than human tenderness. "You have aimed loftily. You have done nobly. Do not repent that with so high and pure a feeling you have rejected the best that earth could offer. Aylmer, dearest Aylmer, I am dying." Alas, it was too true. The fatal hand had grappled with the mystery of life, and was the bond by which an angelic spirit kept itself in union with a mortal frame. As the last crimson tint of the birthmark, that sole token of human imperfection, faded from her cheek, the parting breath of the now perfect woman passed into the atmosphere, and her soul, lingering a moment near her husband, took its heavenward flight. Then a hoarse, chuckling laugh was heard again. Thus ever does the gross fatality of earth exult in its invariable triumph over the immortal essence which, in this dim sphere of half-development, demands the completeness of a higher state. Yet, had Aylmer reached a profounder wisdom, he need not thus have flung away the happiness which would have woven his mortal life of the self-same texture with the celestial. The momentary circumstance was too strong for him. He failed to look beyond the shadowy scope of time, and, living once for all in eternity, to find the perfect future in the present. End of The Birthmark by Nathaniel Hawthorne.